I'm a single woman in my mid-30s. This happened a few years ago during one of the lowest points in my life. I had just gone through a painful breakup with my boyfriend of 5 years, the man I honestly believed I would marry someday, the man I thought I'd build a future with. To say I was lost would be putting it lightly. The emotional fallout hit me hard. I stopped taking care of myself altogether. I'd wake up, avoid talking to anyone, drag myself to work, say the bare minimum, and come straight home to curl up in bed until it was time to do it all over again. Weekends were the worst. I'd forget to eat, go days without stepping outside, and spend entire afternoons binge-watching movies just to drown everything out. Not that I really watched them. I barely registered what was on the screen half the time. But I'm not trying to paint a sob story. I'm doing better now. Still, I think about the life I thought I was heading toward, and sometimes it hurts more than I expect it to. Anyway, it was a Saturday night. I was curled up on the couch in my bedroom. Yes, I have a TV and couch in there, and I was watching some forgettable action movie for the sake of background noise. I couldn't even tell you the name. At some point, I looked at my phone. It was just after 9 p.m. I remember because my mom had been calling all day, and this was probably the 4th or 5th time. I let it ring. I didn't have the energy to answer. I knew it came from a good place. She was just worried. But I couldn't handle the small talk or the questions about whether I was eating or getting out of the house. Eventually, I backed out of the movie and clicked on some random horror flick I'd never heard of. Grainy thumbnail, low-budget vibes. It felt like something I could half watch until I passed out. About 20 minutes in, I realized it was worse than I expected. The audio was a disaster. I had to crank the volume up just to catch bits of dialogue, only to have it blare with the next loud sound effect. But I didn't bother changing it. I think part of me was too tired to bother, and another part was mildly entertained by how awful it was. That's when I noticed a strange sound effect in the background. This sharp metallic clang, like a pipe smacking against concrete. It didn't fit. The scene on screen was quiet, the setting nowhere near industrial, and it wasn't even timed with any jump scares or tense moments. It just happened. Once every minute or so, same exact pitch and volume. It was weird, almost like someone had accidentally left a sound loop in the final cut. I kept the movie on, partly curious about how bad it would get. About halfway through, I got up to use the bathroom. For some reason, I paused the movie, something I normally wouldn't do, especially with a movie this bad. When I sat back down and hovered over the remote to press play, the sound happened again. That same clang. Except the movie was paused. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. No audio, no movement. But the sound had been unmistakable, and it had come from inside the house. That's when it clicked. The sound had never been part of the movie. I stayed perfectly still, listening, hoping it was just my mind playing tricks. Then about 45 seconds later, it came again. That exact same metallic clang. I jumped up, heart pounding, and grabbed the small kitchen knife I kept in my desk drawer, mostly for opening boxes, but now it felt like my only line of defense. I checked every room, every closet. Nothing. No signs of a break-in. No one hiding. I started to calm down, thinking maybe I had imagined it when I heard the clang again. Quieter this time. It was coming from my room. That's when it hit me. I had a couple windows open. It was spring, and the weather was finally warming up, so I'd been leaving them cracked in the evenings. I started thinking maybe the sound wasn't coming from inside at all. Maybe it was coming from just outside. That idea scared me even more. I walked over to the window and gently pulled the curtain aside, just enough to see out into the backyard. There it was. One of my deck chairs had been dragged into the middle of the lawn, and standing next to it was a kid, a young boy. He looked way too small to be an adult. He was holding something long, probably a piece of PVC pipe. That's where the sound had been coming from. As soon as I looked out, he hit the chair with the pipe again, almost like he was trying to get my attention. I backed away from the window, feeling a wave of cold fear wash over me. It sounds ridiculous, I know. Afraid of a kid? But something about it didn't feel right. What was he doing out there? Where were his parents? Why had he been out there for so long? The more I thought about it, the more disturbed I felt. I started telling myself he might be maybe he wandered from a nearby house and didn't know where he was. But then, Why wouldn't he just come to the front door? Why wouldn't he knock or shout for help? Why the pipe? Despite every instinct screaming at me, I started walking toward the back door. I turned on the porch light just in case it made him feel safer, or at least gave me a better look at him. But as I reached for the doorknob, something in me stopped. It felt wrong, like I was walking straight into something I wasn't supposed to. And that's when I realized, if the boy really needed help, he'd have said something, or knocked, or done anything other than silently beat on a chair for an hour. My gut told me not to open the door, so I stepped away and quietly moved to a small window beside the door. I gently tilted the blinds and looked out. And that's when I saw them. 2 men, dressed in all black, crouched low just under the edge of my porch light's glow, right outside the door, waiting. My heart dropped. One of them looked up. His eyes met mine through the glass. I yanked the blind shut and sprinted to grab my phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. I had just made it halfway up the stairs when I heard the first bang on the back door. They were trying to break in. I locked myself in the bathroom, struggling to breathe. I couldn't stop shaking. Then I heard it, a window crashing downstairs. Footsteps. Voices. They were in the house. One of them started coming up the stairs. I could hear them outside the bathroom door, and the knob turned ever so slightly, and then a loud bang as someone tried to kick it open. That's when I screamed. I shouted that the police were on their way, that they were already on the line. As soon as I said it, the footsteps bolted. I heard a door slam downstairs. Then, nothing. The police arrived not long after. I told them everything, but I didn't have cameras. No clear description, just a terrifying encounter and a blurry silhouette of a kid I couldn't stop thinking about. They took it seriously, especially because of the child. They said that kind of detail meant whoever planned this had done it before, or would do it again. And that chilled me to the core. The idea that they used a child as bait. There's no version of that isn't horrifying. The police said I was probably targeted at random, but the whole thing felt way too organized. I ended up moving a few months later. I've tried to move on. Life is better now, but I still think about that night. And I still wonder about that kid. I really hope he's okay. But if I'm being honest, I doubt it. It's 2024 right now, and I'm just a few weeks away from graduating college. Before I get into this, I need to rant for a second. I've never understood how some of my friends managed to survive those week-long spring break trips to Miami or wherever else people go to get drunk and sunburned. I can't do it. I genuinely don't have the energy. So for every year of college, spring break has been my excuse to go back home and just breathe. This past one was no different. I basically went off the grid for a week. No school stress, no social drama, just rest. I was especially annoyed at the time because I had submitted a carefully written regrade request for a midterm and my TA rejected it for literally no reason. I had receipts. But whatever, I was home now. It was Monday morning. I didn't have any big plans, just wanted to get a workout in. That's always been my little sanity ritual. Working out first thing in the morning makes me feel like I actually have my life together. So even though I was on break, I still set my alarm for 6 a.m. and forced myself out of bed. I left the house around 6:20, dressed and caffeinated. The gym was about 15 minutes away, mostly a drive through quiet residential streets, super familiar, super safe. I grew up in this neighborhood. It's peaceful, but honestly, kind of boring now that everyone I grew up with has moved on. I had music playing, some random YouTube playlist, when something caught my eye. An ice cream truck. It was just sitting there along the curb, engine off, no lights, totally silent. And that wouldn't have been super weird if it were like July, but this was mid-March. Cold, cloudy. Definitely not ice cream weather. All the kids were still in school too, so there was zero reason for a truck like that to be around. I slowed down instinctively, glancing into the driver's window. Empty. No one inside. I turned the corner and kept going, but the image stuck in my head longer than I expected. There was just something off about it. We never even had ice cream trucks in my neighborhood when I was a kid. Not once. It wasn't that kind of area. Still, I brushed it off. I got to the gym, did my workout, grabbed a smoothie, and drove home feeling pretty good about my morning. But then I turned onto the same street as before, and the truck was still there. Same spot. Same eerie stillness. Now that made me pause. I figured someone would have called it in by now. People in my neighborhood are weirdly uptight, like get off my lawn levels of uptight. One time my friend literally got yelled at for parking outside a house for 5 minutes while we waited for someone. So yeah, people notice things. I looped around the block for another look, half out of curiosity and half to convince myself it was nothing. This time, there was someone inside. And I think I was a little too obvious about staring because the guy in the front seat looked right at me. And I mean right at me. Our eyes locked for a few seconds and he looked wrong. He had a long, almost cartoonish nose and a wiry beard that looked like it had never met a razor. He looked like someone who lived out of his vehicle. Something about him instantly gave me that prickly, get away now feeling. I drove straight home and tried to shake it off. My parents were both at work, so I had the house to myself. I spent a few hours doing nothing, scrolling, watching videos, snacking. Eventually, I went out to check the mail, and that's when I saw it again. The same ice cream truck, parked down the street, just across from my house. Not directly in front, but close enough to make my stomach drop. I froze. There's no way that guy just happened to show up here. Not after our weird eye contact. Not after he'd been sitting in that same spot for hours. I grabbed the mail and walked back inside like nothing was wrong. Once upstairs, I went into the guest bedroom. It's the one that faces the street. And peeked through the curtains. He was still there. The truck was in clear view, but nothing was happening. Still, I couldn't stop watching. Every time I looked away, I felt like I needed to check again. And every time I did, the truck had moved. Just a little. A few houses over. Then back. Always lingering. I didn't know whether I should call the police. What would I even say? Hi, there's a weird guy in an ice cream truck? I felt like I'd get laughed off the phone, but I was too curious and scared. My older brother's obsessed with bird watching, so I dug through his closet for his binoculars. I went back to the window and focused in, and my heart just stopped. The man was looking back at me, with his own binoculars. The second he realized I saw him, he dropped them, started the truck, and drove off. I was shaking. He'd been watching me the whole time, stalking me since that morning. That's when I finally called the police. I told them about the truck, the man, the binoculars, the whole thing. The dispatcher said they'd send someone to patrol the neighborhood. She sounded calm. Too calm. When my parents got home, I told them everything. They were disturbed, obviously, but also told me not to panic. I was still shaken up, but eventually I went to bed and somehow fell asleep. Until around 3 a.m. when I suddenly woke up. I wasn't sure what woke me until I heard it. Faint music. Barely audible at first, like it wasn't even real. But as I strained to listen, the sound sharpened. It was the jingle of an ice cream truck. I froze. Then I heard something tap softly against the glass of my bedroom window, like a pebble. My brain made the connection instantly. Someone was throwing rocks to get my attention. I didn't want to look. I really didn't want to. But eventually, I forced myself to creep over, stand beside the window, and pull back the curtain. Standing in the front yard was the man. And on either side of him, holding his hands, were two small figures. Children. I couldn't really see them clearly in the dark, but they were short, still, and holding his hands. My stomach turned. I backed away and ran to wake my dad, dialing 911 as I went. By the time we got outside, the man was gone. The police showed up a little while later and took a report. Nothing ever came of it. I went back to school a few days later, and life went back to normal. Until my mom called a few days ago. There was a missing persons case. 2 6-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, who vanished from a neighborhood about 30 minutes away. As soon as she said it, I thought of that night. Those two tiny figures. I don't know what that man wanted from me. Maybe he thought I saw too much. Maybe he wanted to scare me. Or maybe he was just broken in a way I'll never understand. We told the police everything again. I don't know if anything will come of it, but I haven't stopped thinking about those kids, and I don't think I ever will. This happened about 9 months ago last spring. I work as a sales associate at BMW, so my schedule is pretty packed. Even when I'm not at the dealership, I'm glued to my phone, responding to calls, texts, follow-ups. Honestly, some days it feels like I work more off the clock than on it. Because of my job, I have to answer every call, even the ones from unknown numbers. It's annoying, but it could always be a potential client. That means I get a lot of spam and scam calls, but I don't have the luxury of screening them. One night around 10 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I was already in bed, half asleep, and for once, I let it ring out. No voicemail. I figured if it was important, they'd leave something. But then it rang again. Same number. Reluctantly, I answered. I was a little irritated, but I kept my voice professional, just in case. At first, all I heard was static. Thick, broken fuzz. I was about to hang up, but then, underneath the noise, I heard a voice. My voice. It froze me. It wasn't just similar, it was me. After a few seconds, I realized I was listening to a recording of a conversation I'd had earlier that day with a client. Basic stuff. Pricing, scheduling a test drive. Nothing private, but definitely real. I hung up immediately. I just sat there staring at my screen, heart racing, trying to make sense of it. Maybe the client had accidentally recorded the call and was playing it back. Maybe he dialed me by mistake. That theory didn't explain why the number was different, but it was the only thing that didn't feel completely insane. The next morning, I called the client back. He picked up, cheerful and casual, but when I asked about the call from the night before, he was confused. He hadn't called. No idea what I was talking about. And for some reason, I believed him. I got through the day like normal, but later that night, around the same time, I got another call. Different number. I picked up right away. And just like before, I heard a static-heavy recording of a conversation I'd had that day with a different client. This one was even more disturbing. It only played my side of the conversation. The other person's voice wasn't there, just me talking into the void. That's when it hit me. Someone was recording me, not the calls, me. I barely slept that night. For a full week, the pattern continued. Every night, a new number. Every call, a recording of that day's conversation. Always static, always one-sided. I started recording the calls myself, not because I had a plan, just because it felt like the right thing to do. By the fourth night, I was unraveling. I was constantly on edge, checking the windows, locking and relocking the door, leaving lights on in every room. I even shoved a chair under my bedroom doorknob. I couldn't explain why. I just felt watched. Hunted. I started answering all calls from my car where I could see my surroundings. I knew it sounded paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Eventually, I went to the police. I felt ridiculous, trying to explain this whole situation to an officer who clearly didn't take me seriously. They said they could look into the numbers, but unless there was a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. That made me feel worse, helpless, alone. Then suddenly it stopped. No more calls, just silence. And somehow that made things worse. The absence made my paranoia even sharper. I have a family history of mental illness. My mom is schizophrenic, and I started wondering if it was finally catching up to me. I started to lose trust in my own thoughts. After a few days of silence, I switched to a brand new phone number. Huge hassle, but I felt like the old number was compromised. I notified clients, updated my contacts, everything. For a little while, it worked. Then one night, after work, it happened again. New number. Unknown caller. Same static. Same eerie, one-sided recording. My voice from earlier that day. But this time I didn't hang up. I spoke. I said, "I don't know who you are, or why you're doing this, but if it's money you want, I can pay. Just tell me what you want." And then, someone responded. The voice was heavily distorted, like it was run through a filter or voice changer. Just 3 words, 11 o'clock. Then silence. I know how it sounds, and I can't explain it. I gave them my address. I told them to come. I was desperate for it to end, even if it meant confronting whatever this was. I was sleep-deprived, anxious, and irrational. I wasn't thinking straight. At 10:30, I loaded the handgun I keep for self-defense and sat at my kitchen table. I waited. I kept checking the clock, heart pounding, spiraling deeper into thoughts I don't even want to repeat. 11 came and went. No one showed. I didn't move. I sat there all night with the gun in my lap and finally passed out in the chair. That was the worst night of my life. But it was also the last. I never got another call after that. I wish I could say it gave me closure, but it didn't. I never found out who was behind it, how they recorded me, or why they stopped. I moved to a new place, changed every password, reset my whole digital life. But the fear? That never really left. It took a lot of therapy, time off work, and distance from that chapter to feel even remotely okay again. Sometimes I still wonder if I imagined it all, if my mind, already vulnerable, simply cracked under the pressure. But then I look at the recordings I saved. I hear myself, my real voice, echoing back at me from some unknown source. And I know it happened. I just don't know why.